I love that beginning.
What an
Still to
intro.
this day.
What an intro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'd just like to say welcome tonight to the Phantom Menace, where we discuss a film which, to me, I absolutely adore the Phantom Menace. I loved it from the very, very beginning. I know it hasn't gone down well over the years, but I think since Disney's bought Star Wars, there's a bit of a much-loved reoccurrence for the Phantom Menace, if you'll have me. I think people are now looking at it totally different from what they did at the time, considering it was so different from the first trilogy of Star Wars. So first of all, just like to welcome everyone, say thanks for coming on the stream tonight. Brilliant to you all.
No problem.
Thanks for having us.
And I'll start the ball off, really. I'm just going to say, for talking about the Phantom Menace, I think because there's quite a few of us on tonight, the best thing is just 3 questions or 3 thoughts on what you think. So I'll start the ball rolling, really. And my first question is, for me, I think the Phantom Menace trailer will go down as the greatest trailer I will ever watch in my life. There was nothing more exciting because you Americans got, if I remember correctly, you got the Phantom Menace before we did. For once, a Star Wars film was released about 6 or 7 weeks, I think, in America before we got it. But we used to have a show over here called America's Top 10, and it was hosted by Casey Kasem. And it'd go down all the American Top 10 films. Yeah. And when we used to watch that, I used to stay up till like 3 in the morning to tape America's Top 10 just to get that 3-minute clip of the Phantom Menace, you know, because you'd already got the trailer, the film was out, so little things were more being shown. And for me, it was the greatest trailer ever. So I'll go around the board. What do you think, Martin, of that?
Yeah, I agree. So, I mean, I remember the evening before the trailer first came out in Britain. It was shown on the Big Breakfast over here in the morning, and obviously I think it was about 8:30, and I would have been on my way to work. So what I did is I stuck my VHS recorder on record, but I put it on long play just to make sure that I recorded it. And then I rushed home at the end of the day. I must have got home about 6, and I just sat there with a remote control forwarding it to find the trailer. Sat there, watched the trailer, wound it back, watched the trailer, wound it back, watched the trailer. My mate knocks on the door. He came round. We both watched the trailer again, and I've got to be honest, I had tears in my eyes when it had
you big softies.
I don't care. It had the old school Star Wars original trilogy music over the top of new Star Wars, and I was sold. I was in from that moment. I was in the hype train, and I didn't get off up until, well, probably still on it today, to be honest. But yeah, the trailer was a special moment.
It was. What about you, Mark? What did you think?
I was in Harrods. You know, the department store, Harrods. I was meeting a friend who works there when I lived in London for years, and he said, "Oh, I'm finishing work about 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon," and I'd gone into Harrods, and Harrods had it playing there, and I just remember the what was the Jar Jar, the Gungans coming out of the. Do you remember that the music? Oh, like it was all foggy and it's coming out. That's something I'll always. And then obviously, you see Darth Maul at the end when he pulls out that double. I mean, this is something that we've always played in our heads when we're playing with the different lightsabers of different colors. And this thing, and just the whole image of him just leaning, and well, not leaning like Des, but leaning. You know what I mean? So yeah, I was in Harrods. I'll never forget it. And you're right. I think what was it? 16 years before, after the Return of the Jedi.
Yeah,
so it was a long time. So yeah, that's where I was.
Yeah. About you, Connor?
Well, I don't remember where I was for the trailer, but I remember probably being the last one to see it, because back then you didn't have internet, you didn't have access to video on demand, and I remember everyone else was talking about it, and I kept missing it, and eventually I got to see it, and jaw was dropped, and just the excitement built, and it was a strange time as well. So I was getting excited over a new Star Wars film coming out, and a sort of a new chapter for Star Wars, albeit a prequel. But at the same time, I was in college, I was becoming an adult, I was sort of moving on with my life. But it was and it's kind of what we're probably all still doing it here today, like all these years later, just getting pulled back into to the love and the joy of Star Wars. So I just remember that feeling from the trailer when I eventually got to see it.
Yeah, brilliant trailer one. It was just, honestly, to me, there was just something about it'll never leave me. Do you know? I always judge other trailers now by the Phantom Menace. What did you think, Des?
Well, I can remember, like Martin, I was at work, and I think Mrs. T, she'd recorded it off must have been the Big Breakfast then, and didn't watch it until I got home. And I remember sat there with my dinner, just open mouthed, just watching it. And we'd see a lot of photos and sort of papers and what have you. But like you said, there was no internet sort of spoilers and all this sort of stuff. So just little snippets of photos. And then just to actually see it in the flesh, acting out, it was just amazing. Just jaw dropping. To see it again. You say 16 years, but they were a long 16 years.
Yeah.
You look back 16 years from today, and it just seems 5 years ago.
I think going from a kid, I always thought that was it for Star Wars after Return of the Jedi. I never in my head thought there's going to be more, and he's going to do. It's only as I got to get older a bit, I thought, he did write more of these. As you're learning about Star Wars, you're getting the books, you're going behind the scenes. But there's no internet at this time. You got what you got from magazines and books, really.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think for like you said, there 16 years was a big wait, wasn't it?
Yeah.
How did you feel, Matt, watching that trailer? And
you're thinking at the time we were 2 years out from the special editions hitting theaters again, and I was excited about those just to see Star Wars in a theater again. And then you go back and go, that brought out the sin of Greedo shooting first and all that. There were some changes, stuff like that. I still enjoyed them. It's Star Wars in the big in the theater where it's meant to be seen. And I remember there were people that would go and buy tickets for movies just to go in and see the Phantom Menace trailer and then leave.
Yep.
I mean, how many movies got great box office because people wanted to see the episode 1 trailer?
Yeah, people would walk up to the box office. I remember that because a couple of my friends did it. They walk up to the box office and ask which movie's showing the trailer for Star Wars. And then they would buy a ticket to that movie, just watch the trailer, then leave. Yeah.
And at the time, there was a website, the Bounty Hunter Collective. The forums there. They eventually became the forums at Rebel Scum because Philip Wise bought them out. But I remember we were in there and we were all just like, what is, trying to figure out what each scene was. I mean, it was like somebody thought, that the troop transports that the Trade Federation had up on the top of the hill, someone's like, that's some kind of altar. It was like everybody's way off.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what any of this stuff is. And then it was like, and then you see Darth Maul and you see that second lightsaber light up, and I was like, this is going to be good. And, and overall, you look at the movie itself. I don't know if we're going to talk about this more later, but I mean, it was like, George Lucas made this movie knowing he was making 2 more.
Yeah.
So, I mean, really, this movie is all set up for the next 2. It's really all that's happening. It's just all this movie does is establish characters and gives you a sense of what the world is like. It doesn't move the plot very much. And I think, and I think a lot of people had a problem with that, except, you just didn't have the magnification of social media at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, would it have gone down?
I mean, you talk about hype. I mean, you think about all the hype there was for The Force Awakens when that was coming out. But I mean, this was like, George Lucas making another Star Wars movie. And when this trailer hit, I mean, the hype was through the roof for this.
Yeah, massive one.
Yeah. Oh, it was awesome. And I mean, and overall, I think the prequel trilogy is very good. I've talked about, there are issues with it. It's not perfect by any means, but the original trilogy is not perfect either. It's some of my favorite movies of my entire life, and I can pick them apart too. But yeah, I mean, you just going with the trailer. I mean, the hype for that thing was just over the moon. I mean, it was because it was showing. It gave you the glimpse, gave you no indication really of the plot other than you see Anakin being very young. And it was, so it was. Yeah, I just saw that comment. But it was really kind of a great trailer because it didn't give. It gave you a hint of what you were going to see, but it didn't give anything away. And that was perfect. So it was like, I went into that theater, and it was like I had just moved to Alaska, and I had to find where the theater was. I bought tickets like a week in advance to see it, and we ended up going after work on opening day. So it was like, once I got off duty, it was like go home, change, grab some Taco Bell, and got to the theater to get in line to go get a good seat. And
that's the thing. It's films like that. There's not many, is there? That of all the thousands and thousands of films we've sat through, only a certain few still spark memories of the day and where you were, and everything about that sort of week of it all. And how about you, John? What did you feel like watching the trailer first time you ever saw it?
I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but this shirt that I have on is part of what it means to me.
First in Majesty Star Wars.
When we saw that trailer, we immediately went to the theaters, and we set up. We literally camped outside in tents for a full week to get tickets. We were one of the first. We were tied as the first line. The other first lineup was in Seattle, so there was two lineups in the entire country that started a full 6-7 days before the tickets went on sale, and that was one line in Seattle and our line in New York, in Rochester, New York. And we spent the whole week watching that trailer, playing trivia games, showing each other action figures. It was like
brilliant,
an experience. That to me is one of the greatest Star Wars experiences of my entire life. The Phantom Menace. The Phantom Menace means so much to me that it's just, you can barely put it into words. I mean, the friends I made both in line and friends that came with me to be in line, because we met just as many new people from forming that line. And it was sponsored by a local radio station. We were in the newspaper a number of times, like you just saw. And that's me hiding behind the AT-AT with my X-Wing in hand, And it was just, we had like television coverage. They kept coming down and doing things with us all week long, in the morning shows and in the evening on the 6 o'clock news and stuff. So it was like an experience beyond anything that we'd ever in our lives experienced before. And it's all because of this great franchise and that wonderful movie, And and I'm sure we'll talk more about the lineups and what we did later on. But I mean, that was it for me. I mean, I was just sold immediately. And like I said, I got enough tickets to watch it back to back all day long. I literally sat there from the first show till they kicked us out when they were closing the doors. And then I was back the next day. You know what I mean? I stayed there the whole weekend. We watched it all day, from the moment it opened on Thursday night to all day Friday to all day Saturday, all day Sunday. I literally spent that whole weekend doing nothing but watching Phantom Menace back to back to back to back to back, and eating like chips and cheese and hot dogs from the concession stand. You know what I mean? Popcorn and drinking soda.
Your GI, I feel. Let's all just have a quick moment of silence for John's GI track for that week.
But at 20-some years old, it didn't faze me at all. At 20-some years old, that didn't faze you at all when you were that age.
It's the only film I've ever seen in the movie in 1999 and over here in the States. The only Star Wars movie I've seen both times, when it first released and the anniversary last year in this country. Wow. So it means a lot.
Which one was the better experience? Just before I ask Dave, which one was your better experience there? It must have been America, because the British are a bit like, we're
very quiet.
America's like, whoa!
I'll show you something here. I mean, this is us last year. When we went last year, and I took my kids, because obviously my kids had never seen it. But I always think that Phantom Menace is one really that's aimed at all of us. Kids will love it just as much as, with your Jar Jars, which has never bothered me. So that was us. And then Josh McNear got us all T-shirts, 25th anniversary T-shirts.
Cool.
Like that. And my girls loved it, and my little boy loved it, and so forth. And there we were right there, and we went to see it. Well, you're laughing at. That's just for the ladies.
Look at that. If Homer Simpson was real. Homer Simpson
There's a giant long arm covering the whole poster up.
Obviously,
there's Shabby Geek's Kara there, taking him to the cinema. There's his Kara.
Well, the thing about it is, one of the things that surprised me before we get on to everybody else's experiences of it is how packed it was. It was heaving. And the funniest thing is, I've been to see, you know, I'm not really a cinema goer, but I will when it's a big movie. Do you know what I mean? Like an Avengers movie or something, I'll go to the cinema. And it is so funny that the year before we went to see Return of the Jedi, it was packed. And this year, last year, sorry, we went to see Phantom Menace, and it was packed. You know what I mean? And the only thing I can remember from the 1999, I was in New Hampshire. I went to one of my friends was Kumulum Sade at University of New Hampshire. So I went to see, she was doing it the time it was out. So I went to see that. And the experience was everyone with lightsabers and cheering. And it was an experience to me because we don't do that, do we? We were just like, oh, that was good. You know what I mean? But the experience was awesome. Yeah, and it is a movie to me because of these sort of memories and experiences. Why it means a lot to me, this movie. I've always
I think I'm a bit like where I'm from. It's not very cultured. And I went out to see the Phantom Menace here. One of the only things I can remember is that when he got to the Jedi court scene and there's that Jedi and he's got a really long neck, some lad at the front shouts, "Why'd you naked?" Everyone laughed, you know what I mean? So it's just one of the stupid things here for it.
Yarl Poof. It's Yarl Poof.
What was it like in your place, Dave, at Yorkshire? What were they like? Were they all...
Well, I went to the first showing. Like Des, they had the big press were there watching all these lunatics queue up to see this film down at the Huddersfield Cinema. So we had his photos taken. We got in. I've never seen a crowd like it, to be honest, in cinema as an adult. Anyway, I'm sure when I was younger, they were busy in the cinemas, but this was just something else. People queuing to get in, and you don't see that now. You just go in, take a seat. That's it now. But
now in most theaters, you can pick which seat you want before you even.
Same,
for each one of these movies, even when it was the midnight show, I would show up at like 6 in the evening because I wanted to get in line because I wanted to be the first one in the theater to get the seat that I wanted. You know.
Yeah, now it's just you can pick them.
Yeah, you don't have to do that anymore.
Same as Martin though. I seen the trailer on the Big Breakfast. I did the same thing he did. Recorded it, went to work. Came back, forwarded all footage, and it's probably like you said, Si, it's probably the best trailer that they're ever going to be.
It's fantastic, wasn't it?
The way it's all edited together, with like the music in there and all the characters you know they're going to be. You see Obi-Wan, you see a younger Yoda, all rubbery and weird.
You guys keep saying the Big Breakfast, and over here, a Big Breakfast is a meal you buy at McDonald's. It has eggs and sausage, and so I keep thinking,
John,
you look down into your eggs, and there in your eggs is Darth Maul. Like,
it'd be like the Today Show on Channel 4. It was a bit alternative, but it was a really good show. And in the 90s, a lot of us in our generation, we loved the Big Breakfast. We got up for it and watched it because it was so funny as well. So on the show, I think the Big Breakfast got the exclusive clip, didn't they? It must have done because
I think so,
we all remember the Big Breakfast from it. But it's a great show, wasn't it?
Yeah. Denise Van Outen.
Oh yeah, it all just good lad. You see Ewan McGregor just shout no, and all that footage after it, all the explosions and the battle droids going through the fire. That's something you never forget.
No, it was a brilliant one in them days.
Yeah.
Oh, how old were we? 99. I was 23.
I was trying to work that out earlier, but I got bored.
Yes, it was 23. Yeah. What about you, Scott?
Yeah, 21.
Do you have the same thing?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, I was 24. I remember seeing it at the cinema. So that moment that the Gungans come out of the mist, was just phenomenal on the big screen. And then I think as Martin alluded, it's Star Wars music over all this new stuff, and you kind of knew what's coming. I mean, I think magazines like Starburst and such like were around, so you'd have been reading up, finding every little bit of news you could about it, and then you get to see this amazing trailer, and it just leaves you wanting more, doesn't it? Really, to find out who everyone is, the ones you don't recognise anyway. So but I do seem to remember trying to download it as well, and waiting absolutely ages for it downloading. And you know how you'd play the first 3 seconds, so you just have to watch like 3 seconds, and
Yeah,
You wait
It's
to
big
wait.
like Bob,
Yeah.
My internet is so slow.
That's the way Connor watches football now, to be honest.
No, it's
Don't
funny
pay
that
for it
because
though.
Smithwell said it in the chat before. He said there was a copy going around, and I stayed away from that copy. It all got passed around with us as well. Oh, we've got the Phantom Menace in it. And I was like, I don't want to watch it on any dodgy copy. I want to, we've waited a long time for a new Star Wars. Now I know it's coming. I'm going to the cinema. I'm not going to so I stayed away from that copy. Yeah, I didn't want to watch it.
But the
Well, that's the Americans now
sound
in
a big
house
thing
6
in the
weeks
cinema
earlier.
then. The THX thing. Remember that was kind of new back then as well. And it was see Star Wars with Dolby surround sound. Or
I remember
THX.
George Lucas was originally going to it's only going out in THX theaters, and there's like 8 of them. I was like, what are you doing? He changed his mind. He's no, Dolby 5.1 will be good enough.
Well, I think Scott was talking about downloading the trailer. It's not the movie, the trailer.
Yeah,
and I remember doing that. The trailer for us was like that big on the screen. Like we couldn't download it as a full screen thing. It was like this little tiny square.
Like a little match
and I remember us all going like, we could barely see it.
You couldn't make it bigger.
What was the software back then? Real time quick player or something like that?
Yeah, something like that.
Spectrum 48K connection. Connected to VHS.
Stu, do you remember your first time watching it, Stu?
I do, yeah. And to be quite honest with you, up until I watched the trailer on the clip now, I couldn't really remember too much about it. I always remember that there was some kind of dialogue about like a legend has a beginning and a saga has a beginning, all that sort of stuff. So I remember that quite vividly. I remember the Gungans coming out of the mist, and I just thought, what a fantastic shot at that is. It looked absolutely stunning. And I think someone mentioned it as well before. It was a time where trailers enticed you into going to the movies to seeing it on the big screen.
I agree with
That's
that.
where you got excited about it. I know I was for sure. And so, like you say, back in the day, there was no internet, and we would go to the comic stores and stuff like that and try and look for all the comics and see all the different, not the comics, but the magazines to see if there's any clippings of it in there and stuff like that. And then, of course, Darth Maul and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, look, like you say, there was Star Wars. There wasn't any Star Wars for 16 years movie-wise, and then this come out, and yeah, I thought it was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. What a great time. And you know what? Sometimes I wish it was like that now, and that this generation could appreciate that kind of thing that we did when we were, because it was so simple, but it just meant a lot, didn't it? It was so simple, but it meant a lot.
It was one of the last ones. The other part of Phantom Menace is it was one of the last ones to do it, because by the time, when Phantom Menace was out, immediately the theater asked us, we're walking out like Saturday or Sunday night, and the manager comes over. This thing blew up like crazy. People were talking about our theater all over the country. It was on websites. It was on, there was like StarWarsLineups.com. It was on that, and the manager thanked us for like promoting his theater like all over the place. And he's like, "Are you going to come back and do it for for the next one, for Star Wars 2?" We didn't know what it was called at that time, but we know it's Attack of the Clones. And we said yes. But by the time Attack of the Clones came out, there was no reason to line up for tickets, because by then you could just order them online or call ahead and get tickets. There was zero reason to buy them at the box office by the time Star Wars 2 came out. So I distinctly remember that going, it's dead now. No one's ever going to camp out for a movie ever again. Like, and no one's going to camp out for like concert tickets or anything ever again. Because like we camped out for like 4 days to see Rush once. We camped out for like 3 or 4 days to get Metallica tickets once. We were literally sleeping on the steps of like the War Memorial in Rochester, New York, downtown in the city, to get tickets for these concerts. And we did it 4 or 5 different times for different shows. And I distinctly remember Metallica and Rush, because those were like the longest campouts. But it was like, I just remember after Phantom Menace saying, wow, no one's going to do this stuff ever again. This is not needed for anything, I'm
going off topic here now, but I felt that this year or last year when we were all trying to get Oasis tickets when the reunion tour was announced, and we're all sitting here trying to refresh screens back in the day, and we used to, there was a HMV shop on Henry Street here in Dublin, but there's right beside it, there's a department store with a big long window, and I had a canopy. So we'd always like that. If any time there was a concert you wanted to go, you'd queue up under the canopy so you were kept dry, and you'd all huddle up, and everyone be singing, and there's probably a few cans involved or whatever, but it was a bit of cracking. Like that's never going to happen again.
Never again.
Laptop refreshing. So
Des, what's this?
Yeah, this is Des.
That's me in the queue. So John's saying he started queuing up about 6 weeks or 6 days before.
Is that you right there? Is that you right there?
That's me. Yeah, I'm leaning. I'm the one leaning.
You can't make it up, can you?
Oh, there you go. Same spot. Look at that.
And the funny thing is, John, we were talking before. Like I said, I went to the 40th anniversary last year, and it was absolutely packed. So was Desi's watch.
Wow! Wow! Look at that theater.
No, well, Des booked out the theater.
Is that what it was?
They wanted quiet.
Yeah, no distractions.
So you had the same experience, Des, as John did.
Yeah, but instead of queuing up 3 or 4 days before, we started queuing up about 6 at night. So we rocked up there at our local one, and there was some of the foyer people are dressed up as sort of Jedis, and they were doing a bit of a play acting and doing all that. And when the stroke of midnight, they let us in, and we got our tickets for the first show, which I think was 9 o'clock in the morning. And as I come out, the local radio station shoved a microphone in my face. Oh, how does it feel to be the first person to have Star Wars tickets? You got to remember, we've been stood there for like 6 hours. I'm tired. I think it was Zoe's birthday. She was 1. And I'm absolutely shattered. And I just fell to pieces. Oh, I can't believe it. We've got it on the tape somewhere.
Find it. Yeah.
Zoe's now crushed. You missed her birthday, her first birthday.
Yeah.
Oh, God, Father of the Year there, Des.
Well, there's a reason why I missed it. Say there is a reason why.
Do you know what, Des? I'd have come out and gone, he dies at the end, and walked off.
Yeah. Wait a minute. I thought Anakin was supposed to be Vader. I didn't know he died at the end of the series.
It's one of the things I was going to say. It's a little bit different now because obviously we all know each other and we all do the socials and stuff. But back then, what surprised me back then is before the Phantom Menace, we were all children. And so basically your Star Wars and your collection and your toys was either toy day at school or on your own, if you will. And one of the things that surprised me when we got to 1999 and the amount of atmosphere and fever that was around Star Wars, to me it made me go, wow, there is more people like me out there. Because I think that was my first experience of knowing just how big this franchise actually is, because you're seeing everybody else queuing for weeks or days or leaning, like Des. So that's what it was for me.
I think it was a little different because our fan club started in the beginning of 1994 because I was working at a comic book store and got all the information coming that in 1995 they were going to bring back Star Wars figures. Yeah. And because also like a few years earlier, my dad had bought me the AT-AT. I had already been collecting toys for like 3 or 4 years by 94. But in 94, I met like 4 or 5 other people that were into Star Wars, and we started our own little Star Wars fan club locally in Rochester. So by 99, we had like 100 members in our Star Wars fan club, and we were,
wow.
I mean, they were all collecting toys and comics. So it was a totally different experience, because I had been around these people for 5 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, to get things back on track, I did ask everybody if they've got 3 questions. So what I'll do is I'll go reverse way now, and I'll ask Stu just what's your first question or thought you'd like to just give to the panel.
Yeah, my first thought is: do you feel George Lucas made a mistake in killing off Darth Maul?
Yes,
at the end.
Yeah,
massively. Because they didn't kill him off, did they? And even though it took a few years to get him back, and we did get him back, I think George Lucas himself knew, why did I kill him off? For the first one, he was the best Sith outside of Darth Vader, wasn't he? Let's be fair. Darth Maul was just a character that we all loved. the way he looks, the way he was a proper martial artist, and that double-ended lightsaber, like I said, it blew us all away. That Shabby was dead right. First time you saw that, you're like, "Oh my god!" Like you couldn't believe it.
Yeah,
so for me, Stu,
that was a when that bay door opened and you saw Darth Maul standing there with his robe. He drops his robes, he gets his lightsaber, it ignites. That for me, I feel anyway with the Star Wars movies, that was possibly one of the last wow moments that I've seen in any of the Star Wars movies. I mean, that was incredible seeing that.
I thought the music was as well, the Duel of the Fates.
Didn't it?
Fantastic.
Well, Darth Maul's like the Boba Fett of the prequel trilogy. He's barely in it, and everybody loves him. He's got
because you're right. I mean, it was great because the first time you saw him when he attacked Qui-Gon on the planet, he had just used the one blade. And then at the end, when you see him step on, it goes da da, and he's like, then it goes da da da, and he turns it sideways, and you're like, what? And he goes, and the other one comes out, and it's like, you're like, oh my god!
When you guys saw that, what was your reaction? What was it like in the theaters when you saw that? Because I'm sure
there was a bigger reaction for it because it was in the trailer.
Yeah.
I thought it was a bigger reaction in the trailer than it was in the theater.
But the
everybody was
still
expecting it to happen. It was really cool. Honestly, that's probably one of the best lightsaber duels in the entire saga.
Well, before then, we've just seen, Vader giving it all this and that.
Well, even George Lucas addressed that.
But
we've never seen a fight like that before.
No, that's the thing. When you saw Darth Maul, and that was the moves he did, and using the Force while he was fighting, and that kind of thing. We were like, I was blown away, man.
Well, even George Lucas addressed it. He wanted you to see the Jedi in their prime because he goes, in the original trilogy, you saw a young kid with no training and old men fighting. That was all you saw. He wanted you to see a spectacle like that. And he described, I thought it was neat, was like George Lucas described a lightsaber duel as they're playing a game of chess, but each move the person makes puts their opponent in check. So that's when it comes down to like just one mistake and they're done. I thought it was fantastic. That was one thing I loved about the prequel trilogy was all the lightsaber duels. They did fantastic.
Yeah. Did have an impressive double ender. Very, very, very good.
Wrong Star Wars film, Dave. That was the one from Van.
I'll tell you what.
How about you, Scott? What's your second question you'd like to put to people? Well, you first, sorry.
More of a sort of a topic of conversation, really. The music.
I put it up there. I really do.
Yeah. I bet all of it. Every Star Wars.
It's got the themes that we knew already, but Duel of the Fates. There's the music of the droid invasion. Music is fantastic. I love the celebration music at the end, and that's I mean, it's just some of the themes it brings in. John Williams just does such a fantastic, incredible job, and it immediately drops you right back into the Star Wars universe.
100% agree.
100%. What are thoughts are?
And yet, Duel of the Fates is so different because it has the choir singing in it. So that's a new thing for us. For really John Williams music, we're used to just the music, and that was new. And it
we'd only really heard that in the fight in the Death Star in Return of the Jedi, hadn't we?
I mean, I know we're not talking about this movie, but even using Duel of Fates when Anakin's on the speeder bike going to get his mother, and it's just the way they use that. So in other words, even though it's the same type of music, it feels so different in these scenes, than just in the Qui-Gon, Darth Maul.
I forgot about that bit.
I agree 100%, Scott. The music, it's original trilogy quality to me. I mean, it's right up there. It really is.
They released a soundtrack for episode 1, which was not just the basic soundtrack, but it had every bit of music for the entire film, and you could listen to the CD, and it started from the beginning of the film to the end. And there's so many little 20-second, 30-second pieces of music that are just as good as some of the stuff that was in the original trilogy. You wouldn't be able to listen to on the normal soundtrack. It's one of the.
It was rumours because it gave away Qui-Gon dying, didn't it?
I was going to say, do you remember that?
Qui-Gon's end or Qui-Gon's fate or something.
I kind of expected it anyway.
No, they changed it. Did you remember? Because I remember this.
Right.
The first time the CD came out, the song was titled Qui-Gon's Death. And then everyone freaked out, and it was people were talking about it, that it gave away the end of the film, because you actually got the soundtrack before the movie hit theaters.
Yeah.
So they quickly changed the back of it to Qui-Gon's fate. So now it's hard to find that first copy that said Qui-Gon's death.
I think I'm
I
right.
thought it was a piece then.
Well, I kind of, the thing was I kind of expected it, because you know how like George Lucas says they don't repeat but they rhyme, and in the first movie in each one the mentor dies.
Yeah.
So in the original movie it was Ben sacrificing himself so the others could escape, and this one it was Qui-Gon Jinn getting defeated by Darth Maul, and even in The Force Awakens, you have Han passing. He was kind of like a mentor figure just for a short while for Rey. So,
I've never seen those movies. I've never seen them.
I know, but yeah,
Dave?
I remember that.
Do you have another question for the panel?
I guess it was Noble End. That's what it was. And now, isn't it Qui-Gon's fate now or something like that? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that the whole thing was they changed the back of the CD so it wouldn't give it away.
Right. So they did change it. Right. Okay.
Not right away.
Yeah, it was a dead giveaway. You're right, pals. You're right.
Yeah, Dave, what were you saying? Sorry.
Yeah. Would you have liked to have seen Qui-Gon survive into the next movie?
Oh, definitely. He was cool.
He'd done his little arc, and that would him done.
Well, because that would have changed. I think if Qui-Gon had lived, Anakin's fate would have been much different.
Yeah,
and you wouldn't have had. I think if he had lived, you wouldn't have had him fall to the dark side.
I think more. I think more. What it is I think Matt's right in that you had to have Qui-Gon die. But I think what it is that we wanted more Qui-Gon. So we wanted to see like a prequel movie where it's just Qui-Gon. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
I think Qui-Gon was a his character was a throwback to the Jedi Order before it became the dogmatic rule-taking Jedi that we see in the prequels. And I think there's something intriguing about that, because when we watched the original trilogy and we heard Obi-Wan say, they were the guardians of peace and justice in the Old Republic, Qui-Gon was the absolute model of what he said a Jedi should be. But the Jedi we're presented with in the prequel trilogy, and this especially is you can't break the rules, we have to do it this way, you're not allowed to break this rule, etc., which obviously led to the dark side taking over. And I'm so, in a way, I know Qui-Gon came back as a Force ghost in the Obi-Wan series, and that kind of broke canon, but I was so glad to see him back to be able to mentor Obi-Wan, so that you kind of got the impression that Obi-Wan learned from him before he sees Luke, and the original trilogy takes off. If I had to choose my favorite Jedi ever, I'd say it'd be Qui-Gon Jinn. Absolutely, he's such
really
a great
wow.
character.
Okay,
yeah.
great character.
I'd echo that, Mark.
No one could play him as well as Liam Neeson did.
No.
Oh yeah,
he made the movie for me.
Yeah.
I think it was funny as well, because this was before Liam Neeson's action movies, wasn't it? And so it was weird for us to see him as a Jedi, if you will. Do you know what I mean? He'd been in a few things even there, but he wasn't what he is now. So he was a great character.
Casting at the time, didn't it? It seemed a bit of a strange choice.
I agree with that. Yeah,
but he was really good.
Do you think if the film had been laid out like Dave says, and how much Disney like their spin-offs and stuff, do you think if the Phantom Menace was made today and Qui-Gon Jinn was killed off as he was in the Phantom Menace, do you think we would have had spin-offs? Do you think we would have had an adventure with Qui-Gon? And
I'll just answer that, Si. He wouldn't have died, would he? Because lightsabers don't kill people these days. I mean, there's
no. It would have been fine, wouldn't it?
That's a good point.
Yeah, he'd have been fine.
He would have
had a very nasty burn.
the flesh wound.
A couple of hours in a back.
Lightsabers have only killed two people: Qui-Gon Jinn and Count Dooku.
And they both deserved it. But you, John, what's your first question you'd like to put to the panel for the Phantom Menace?
Well, I looked at the questions as more like trivia, not just like topics for us to talk
No, that's
about.
Stu's job, John. That's Stu's.
So you can turn
Copyright, John.
we can turn these into topics, because one of the questions I had was like the first droids we saw, like the first astromech and the first protocol droid. And I guess you can turn that into, does anyone know what the first protocol droid was we saw in Phantom Menace? And then we can talk about what these droids, to me, seeing the droids on screen, even though they weren't 3PO and R2 right at the exact moment we started, like just seeing those familiar droid styles really brought it back. Like, yes, it's Star Wars, you know? Like,
I agree with that. Yeah.
And do you remember the first protocol droid that we saw on screen?
She brought the drinks into the
tray. She brought she had
she met them in the
hangar. She had the penis on a tray in there, you know.
Yeah.
It was
Marty got
because even though we didn't see a finished C-3PO in that film. We did actually see a protocol droid. We did see a fully fledged, finished, you know, and right shiny, nice one on a nice ship.
Oh.
There we go. He's got it. Yeah. See? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Focus.
Yeah, perfect.
And then the first astromech we saw was also silver, but it was silver and red. Do you know that one? Does anyone know that one?
R4
Was that
something or other. Yeah, I've got it. I've got him right over there.
It's R2R9, silver and red. Yeah.
Yeah, it came with the Queen Starship.
Yeah.
That's the first one we said. You're right.
Yeah. But those seeing those droids, those are iconic droids to Star Wars, and I don't think they should ever change. Like even today, we should still be seeing astromech and protocol type droids in Star Wars. It's just a staple of Star Wars. It got you imagining that, like, because like you don't. I mean, I don't know how you guys took it, but I took it as though Anakin somehow got a protocol droid like kit, like a kit. Because, like, you knew that protocol droids are manufactured by some company, but you could either get the droid as a whole, or like I thought in Anakin's case, he sort of had like a kit, and he had most of the parts, and he was grabbing other parts from the junk dealer Watto when he had time.
That's where he got everything from. He was just grabbing scrap.
That's how I always saw it, John. Like it was like the remote control kits we used to get and put your engine in. Just build it up like a kit he had. Yeah.
Do you remember in Watto's shop? Do you remember in Watto's shop? You actually see a protocol droid in
the
Yeah, I think that was the shell for 3PO.
That could be the coverings that they used. Yeah, you're right. Yep. Yeah.
How did Anakin teach him 6 million different forms of communication?
I think it was a software patch.
Yeah, it was a software thing, like a chip.
That's a Spectrum 48K you had to put in the
operating system.
Except for the Sith language, you wasn't allowed to remember that.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's not canon, Martin.
That's a good point.
Hi, lot.
And about you, Matt, what's your first question?
I didn't really have any. Going back, kind of a more general thing when you're talking about, like, you know, back in 1999, it was like, now when, you know, everybody's hyped for the trailer, then they see the movie, and I was like, do you remember the backlash the film got? And I think it did. I mean, there was a lot of people that didn't like Jar Jar, and I looked at it as, you know, like, when George Lucas made the original Star Wars, he didn't know he was going to be making any more. And then I don't even think he expected it to blow up the way it did. But when he started making The Phantom Menace, he knew he was making 3 movies. So he spread the story, instead of putting all the story in one movie like he does with Star Wars and making it self-contained story. He makes a movie that is really setting up 2 more movies. And I don't know. I don't know. What do you guys think? You know, like, did you think that was a good idea, or or not?
I think he always had an idea that he wanted to make another 3 movies. I think after Return of the Jedi, obviously he'd gone through like a divorce and stuff like that. He wanted to spend time with his family, and then he left it a while because when Jurassic Park came out, the films again changed how they were made with the CGI. So once he saw that, he was like, right, I can get back to doing the movie that I want to do, because again, he was disappointed with certain aspects of Star Wars. It didn't look, or the original Star Wars. So no, I think he always intended to do those films. It was just a matter of timing. When the technology was there to do those movies, he then actually went and did those movies thanks to Jurassic Park and the CGI there. So, but yeah, like I'm with you. Once you made the Phantom Menace, it would never be in a standalone movie like Star Wars was. You know, he intended to do the other three movies or the other two movies. That's why the Phantom Menace was the way it was. And yeah, it did get some backlash, and it took me a while to appreciate the movie over the course of the years. I didn't appreciate it as much as I should have done at that time when it was released.
I personally don't remember anything against it. Everybody I knew loved it.
I'm the same as you.
Absolutely loved it bits. And it was only years and years later when the internet became like quite a prevalent thing that I discovered there was this massive hatred towards it. But for me, it was always it was never going to be the original trilogy. I went into it thinking that, but for me, it was always Star Wars, and it'll always be in that level as the original trilogy for me because it felt like Star Wars. Absolutely. Of course, there's things about it that I thought could be improved, dialogue, etc. But for me personally, I think it's not a perfect movie, but it's a perfect Star Wars movie, and I really, really loved it. Which is why I was so shocked to find out years later that it was hated as much as it was. And it's really nice in the last few years because I've always been like, as soon as I found this out, I became like commander in chief of the prequel defense force, and I defend those films until like the day I die. But it's been so nice the last few years to talk to people who have perhaps come round a bit to how good they are, and it's so nice now. I live in an era now, I think, where I can comfortably talk to anybody about the 6 movies. And we're all kind of roughly on the same page. I think it's fantastic.
But was it fan or was it media back then? See, that's the thing. I was never. I mean, I always liked Jar Jar. I didn't mind Jar Jar at all. I didn't mind him. You know, a couple of.
I like the idea of it. You know, I mean, it may have, and I met Ahmed Best a couple of years ago at Colorado Springs Comic-Con. The absolute nicest guy you are ever going to meet. Yeah, he is genuinely great, and I like the idea, like the trope, for lack of a better term, of the outcast that becomes the hero. And that's really Jar Jar's journey through this. Is he's been exiled from the rest of the Gungans because, you know, he's destroying everything because he's a klutz.
Clumsy. Yeah.
And then
he knocked over. He knocked out.
He almost killed people.
He knocked out the chiefs. The chiefs. I mean. Yeah. I don't know what a head giver is, but he knocked out her head giver. It's
Boss Nass's like transport, and he crashed it into something like an oxygen generator for the city. He could have killed people.
Oh, he said head giver, so I was thinking something totally different.
Yeah, but the whole thing is like with him, it's like, you know, and even when Boss Nass, if you read the novel, which is I highly recommend reading the novels for all the movies. Boss Nass and the rest of the Gungan Council make him the general of the army because they're hoping it'll kill him off. Because they're like, this guy's gonna get us all killed with his clumsiness.
Well, I think maybe
and it ends up saving the day.
It was just a, you know, and it's funny because you watch these interviews now, and you watch Ahmed Best and you watch Jake Lloyd and all this, and everyone tried to blame the fans, and even they've come out in their own interviews and said themselves it was the media, wasn't the fans. And I was thinking, because I used to think that, you know, the internet wasn't what it was like in 1999. If anyone, I mean, how many of us had it in 99? Barely any of us. So I always thought, where's this hate come from? Because I was the same as Martin. I've always thoroughly.
Well, there was no social media back then.
No, it was the press. It was the media, because we didn't have public forums to sort of shout and scream and dance from back then.
I had the exact opposite experience. So I went into the theater with these guys. Like, we were the first 3 in line, and in picture is Randy and my friend Paul and myself were the first 3 people in line. We sat there the whole time. And Randy actually is quoted in this article as saying, so they say, what if it's bad? And he goes, it can't happen, Randy. And he says, for a Star Wars fan, a true Star Wars fan, it won't be a bad movie. we bought tickets for all day long, all weekend. After the very first showing, Randy got up, didn't say a word to the rest of us, walked over to the trash, threw all his tickets away, and left, quit the Star Wars fan club, and we never saw him again. To this day, I have no idea what happened to Randy. I even went over to his house, and I knocked on the door, because we used to go over there all the time, because his collection was in the basement. It was this giant display of collector's stuff. He had large size, like 3PO and R2 Stormtrooper, before I knew anyone else that had this stuff. He had full-size costumes and, like, Yoda and everything, and he opened the door and he just quietly said, "I'm done with the fan club. I'm done with Star Wars. Don't talk to me. I don't want to discuss it." Wow. And I went back to our fan club. Like I said, there was about 100 people. Like, there was only about 10 or 12 of us that really liked the film. Everybody else hated it.
Wow.
So that most of them, like, through the years, that club went from like 100 down to maybe 20 or 30 people. And there was only a few of us that went to Attack of the Clones because they hated the prequels. They absolutely, and everybody in my area just hated it. And I remember moving to Seattle and finding the same thing. I started talking to people, trying to find a club, because I was in Seattle when Revenge of the Sith came out by then. And I couldn't even find people that were into Star Wars. They hated the prequels so much. And I always questioned, I was like, why? It's not that bad. Yeah. I mean, I thought they were fine. I was like, why? Like,
well, what happened to Randy then? Did you ever see him again?
And then what shocked me was, like, I talked
Randy, if you're watching.
Reach out, Randy.
I stayed in touch with a lot of the other people that didn't like disappear from my life, that just hated the Phantom Menace and stuff, the prequels. But like what amazed me was, even like 10 or 15 years later, they were coming around before even the hype came around to it. They were like, the more I watch those films, the more I understand them now as a trilogy, because they were like, when it was on its own, I didn't like it. But now that I see all three movies put together, I love it. The whole story is great. So they came around to it after those films had been around for a while, and they could rewatch it at home and stuff like that. And that's why I always tell people about the hate around sequels. I'm curious what's going to happen another 20 years from now.
Think about it this way. The original trilogy, I was 6 years old when Star Wars first hit the theaters. That movie was made for kids my age. When the Phantom Menace comes out, I'm 28. It's May of 1999. I'm 28. I'm in the Air Force. I've been in the Air Force for a few years. And that movie wasn't made for me. It was made for the 6-year-old kid in 1999.
Exactly.
And those kids are grown up now. And that's another reason why you see a resurgence of really positive vibes for the prequels, because
that's something I've always.
In the early 2000s, there wasn't a whole lot of. There were people that enjoyed them, but the kids didn't have the voice. It was the adults were kind of like, it's not the same thing as the original trilogy, and the great.
Matt,
that's what I wonder.
Like
when you guys go back and say you were 6 years old when you had the original trilogy, look how cool that was. Oh, yeah. Right. So yes, we were 28 when, or younger than that, when the Phantom Menace come out. But if you look at it, you were saying it was aimed at like for 6-year-olds and younger kids. It was just Jar Jar Binks. He was the comedy relief for that film.
He was definitely in there for kids.
Sitting in a what's it? A courtroom or whatever it was. Do you know what I mean? It was all politics. But I mean, how could you, as a kid, find it exciting to watch delegates squabbling and arguing and stuff like that?
I mean, that wasn't, but that's, generally George Lucas has made Star Wars. It's a movie about space wizards for kids.
Yeah.
I mean,
I always thought it was made for everybody.
There. Well, I don't disagree with you at all, Shabby. I'm just thinking, but his target audience was younger. It wasn't really adults. It was more kid oriented, because you get the kids in there and the marketing, and then they buy the toys. And he had a good hand in the marketing, in the marketing rights, or the merchandising rights for that. So you know, I knew somebody who didn't really like the prequels, and he thought, oh, it's just a way for George Lucas to make more action figures because he's so focused on different characters and stuff. And I don't think it was like that at all.
But I think that's actually a good point that you could flip, because you watch George Lucas Star Wars, whether it be the original trilogy or the prequel trilogy, and there's not a shot in any of those 6 films where there isn't at least 10 interesting looking characters in the background that you're like, oh, who's that? Oh, I wonder what they're up to. Mm-hmm. And that you don't get that anymore.
Well, look at Aura Singh. Aura Singh is in the movie for 2 seconds.
Yeah.
But that's fine.
And I love that. I mean, look at all the stuff that came out
of and Phantom Menace certainly carried on that that trope from the original trilogy.
Yeah.
No,
and
that's in a minute.
Point, that's what I've always wondered about my friend there, was that, like, you know, it's what's weird about it is we spent 5 years in this fan club together, and then all of a sudden he just disappeared. Like, I saw him once a week for 5 years, and then suddenly this guy's gone. But he was probably like 8 to 10 years.
All right,
older.
what did you really do, John? What did you really do? Do you know what I mean? Don't blame Star Wars. What did you do?
He was like 8 to 10 years older than me. So I watched Star Wars when I was 4 or 5 years old. For him, he was probably 13. So I think from him, I wonder, I've always wanted to ask him this, is I wonder if from his perspective, Star Wars Empire and Jedi was a teenager film, teenager trilogy. He watched it when he was a teenager. Where, from my perspective, I've watched it as a kid, growing up as a kid. So when he saw Phantom Menace and seeing Jar Jar and other things that were clearly, you know, probably from his eyes, clearly for kids, he no longer saw Star Wars as a thing for teenagers and people like him. That's the only thing I can imagine.
We can only go back on it, though, over the simple reason when Star Wars came out, we were all children. If we were in our 20s, I think we'd have loved it just as much as when we were kids. You know, it's funny because we've all just said, the majority of us have just said right now, we went to see The Phantom Menace at 23, 24, 25 and still loved it. Do you know what I mean? So I think this whole thing for kids, for me, I agree with what Matt's saying. Maybe he aimed it at that, but it didn't come across as a children's movie. To me, it never has had. You know,
I went to see Jurassic Park, and Jurassic Park absolutely blew my arse off when I saw it. All of a sudden, graphics has stopped having that fuzz around them. They look the same color.
That's been my top 5 franchises.
So when I knew a new Star Wars film was coming, and the special editions, when I knew that they touched them up, they were putting new editions in them, I started to get real itchy. Me being a cinema lover, I thought, oh, I can't wait to see these movies. And you knew The Matrix was coming as well. So when I saw the Phantom Menace, above the character of Jar Jar, above the storyline of the Phantom Menace, above what Jake Lloyd was like as Anakin, it was the spectacular for me. I was just amazed what I was watching. I'd never seen anything like that pod race since the speeder bike chase. Do you know what I mean? And it was just things like that. I was just like, this is amazing cinema. And that's what did it for me.
When I watched it last summer, I felt the same thing, Si. It was just exactly how I remembered it.
It's held up.
Same sort of nostalgia kicks came back, you know.
The letters CGI were more and more spoke about a lot more now when it came to cinema, and you was like, oh, you felt like trendy saying CGI to your mates about films and stuff. But again, this was back in the 90s. Do you know what they were working on here? And like how Lucasfilm was back in the 80s and the 70s, it just made you feel special that you was watching a Lucasfilm movie when you saw the fantastical of this. The cinema of it was amazing. It'll never leave me. Beautiful.
It was lightning.
That's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
It was funny that about the CGI, because you know we talk about the original trilogy and everyone's butthurt about him revamping it, but they've done it with the prequels as well, and yet nobody says anything about that. And do you think we should have left it, or are you happy with the way they redid Yoda? And that's my question.
I'm glad because that puppet that they used in Phantom Menace was horrible. And made him a completely CGI character. I think that really improved it. Another thing was like the DVD release. When the DVD release for this came out, they kind of extended the pod race a bit. They had bigger they introduced a lot more of the pod racers.
Whole second.
They put a bit with the bit with Rats Terrell is just downright dark. Because if you watch through Mos Espa, you see them walking around like tourists, taking pictures and everything else in the background, and then they show him and his family, and then boom, right there in the game. I was like, oh, that is raw. Oh my God. But then you see him on a stretcher at the end.
Yeah.
We didn't that was dark.
And that's the thing. It's just for me, that was more important than any silly voice that Jar Jar had done. That character, I've not seen anything like that since Gollum. Gollum had come along, and I was like, "Oh my God, look at this!" Do you know what I mean? And then you got, I think it was Jar Jar before Gollum, wasn't he? Was it the year before?
Lord of the Rings didn't start until like 2000.
Well, that's what I mean. That's what they were doing in cinema now. You were seeing these CGI characters up. Do you know what I mean? And it was like, nothing I'd ever seen before, so I was more like this.
Well, Delvin says it right here, side. Delvin says a fancy, and that's one of the things, Delvin. I thought last year seeing it when I went to see it again on the big screen, older, and you saw the things like the pod race and stuff. You were like, yeah, now I understand now why people, because a lot of people say Star Wars should always be on the big screen, and I'm like, well, TV shows are fine, but it's not until you see something like that scene, for example, on a big screen.
It still holds up. That pod race still holds up. I mean, you're talking earlier because one of my points is I was going to bring up as CGI because there's parts of the film where it doesn't work, and particularly even the start of the film where the ship comes in and lands in the hangar on the Trade Federation ship, and you see all the droids. The CGI wasn't great. You knew watching the film it was the best it could be at the time.
Yeah,
but it was it was a bit janky. But you go from that to the pod race, where you believe you're sitting in the pod, you believe you're flying through the canyons. And
those sound effects.
Like Ricardo says right here, it's a sound. I agree.
Like that whole part of the movie was just perfect. As Ricardo says, it was mind blowing.
Do you guys in the theaters near you? Do you have like what they call them here? They call them the D box seats, where it's like if the chair has like it'll move with the film.
We have something like it.
It's called
4X. You get a crate to sit on.
Well, the thing was, when the Phantom Menace came out last year, I was really kind of disappointed. My local theater did not put it in the theater that had those seats, because I was like, the boys and I wanted to go and see it in those seats for the pod race and the space battle at the end.
Yeah, and they didn't put them on.
I still kick myself that I didn't see Solo in one of those seats because of just for the Kessel run. That would have been awesome.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. About you, Des, if you got a question to ask the panel.
Merch. What did you think to the merch? How much merch did you buy?
All of it.
I went
everything. That got me back into. That's what got me collecting modern figures.
Yeah.
Was I wanted a Darth? I started off. I wanted a Darth Maul figure.
The coolest thing.
I got to get an Obi-Wan figure.
They used the old Kenner molds for the ships. You got the Falcon back, the Attack back. You got, you know what I mean, the A-wing back.
Well, that started before. That started beforehand because Hasbro started making Star Wars figures in '95.
Yeah, but still, it was around that era, wasn't it? I mean, and so that's the thing. I think by bringing these toys out before these movies, especially for us, got us back into like, oh man, Star Wars is really cool. Because obviously we'd heard rumors by 94, 95 that we were making them. It wasn't like we just found out there was a trailer. We all knew it was coming.
I have a complete card collection of all the Episode 1 figures. I have them all on card.
Wow.
Yeah. So I managed to get these signed. So this is from Jerome Blake, who played Rune Heiko.
Oh, very cool.
So that was at Sandown. Yeah. So this was after the movie. Then I managed to meet Ray Park. So I got both Ray Park figures signed.
Yeah.
So these are like all acrylics for those. But so there's that one as well. And then I love them cards. I met what's his name? I can't remember his name.
Ahmed Best.
And he signed that for Jar Jar Binks. So yeah, I mean the figures for the time, again,
they're good.
They were superb. Like the detail and the paint apps.
Yeah. Look at that Emperor. Look at that Emperor. That is a beautiful Emperor figure. I think the figures are brilliant from this time period.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they were. I mean, even though if you look at them by today's standards, they're a little. I think they do kind of hold up. They're not as articulated or anything, but.
Yeah. No, they were beautiful skulls. Even looking at one of them.
And when you really get into collecting, you can find stuff like this Like this was not released in the United States. We didn't have these 2-packs. You have to go to other countries to get these.
It came with the thing for the flight, the Naboo fighter, didn't it? That.
Yeah.
And these are getting on now, aren't they? These figures are getting to some age now.
There's
I kept a few of them.
26 years old.
There was
that
one.
Yeah, that Maul. It was so hard to find that Darth Maul.
Good. And I've still got, I didn't take it off the wall, but I think DTM's got a loose one of these, you know, the thing that you put it on.
Oh,
so
yeah.
you could
I've got the contact chips and the reader.
The funniest thing I ever found, though, I mean, this is the last thing I'll show. I mean, we've all got tons of episode 1 stuff, but was this? It was the electric, but it says on it, Battle Mauser.
Yeah.
Which I always found fascinating like that. And then, obviously, on the back, it shows you they were rare, apparently. There's they made a few more of them. But I was always funny that because we always knew this was a Mauser, but they'd actually called it a Battle Mauser instead of a.
That's cool.
Yeah, so
that is cool. Yeah. There was a lot of literally.
I got that. I got it right here.
Isn't that beautiful?
Look at that.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That is cool.
That's massive.
That is one thing that I totally can't believe I got rid of at one point.
One of the best play sets ever. That it's
Someone offered. I still had mine in the box, and someone offered me money for it back in the early 2000s, and I thought it was more than.
Oh yeah.
It was more than I could pass up, so I sold it to him, and I'm like, why did I do that?
Yeah, you do sometimes, John. Don't you?
Mine's got. See, Hunter's got it boxed, and he's still got it. He's all boxed up. So
well, mine was all boxed. Yeah, it was still in the box. That's why he wanted it.
It's when you get random stuff like this.
Well, you know why you got that, Des?
Yeah. I'm just waiting till you get to your KFC wrappers and your.
It doesn't work anymore, Des.
Dancing.
The batteries have been borrowed for the remote.
Yeah.
I've got that one, and then I got given this by bloke at work. It was meant to go off.
Oh, the clock.
Oh, look at that!
Ah, yeah, I love that.
Oh, that is class.
Imagine waking up to that every day. Yeah.
Is that a Jar Jar like mask? Can you wear that thing back there?
Johnny wants to know if you could put that on your head.
No, that's behind you. The cloth Jar Jar.
Oh, put kettle on, Des. Put kettle on.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This last thing. Last thing.
Yeah.
Oh, one more.
Oh,
I got that.
That's really hard to get hold of.
Yeah, cool, yeah.
I got one in the package.
No, John was asking then that thing in the corner. Is it a mask or is it a bag or what is it? That Jar Jar?
It's a bag.
It's a bag,
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
There's nothing in it.
Yeah, we went to the midnight thing. Yeah.
No, there's nothing in it. But yeah, just a bag.
Yeah, I remember the rucksacks about, yeah.
That's cool.
That's where I put that vinyl Jawa.
DTM, did you say you wanted to show something? I think you did, didn't you?
Yeah, I've got the ComTalk thing.
That's it.
Yeah.
And they were you pressed that on. Could you hear it all right?
Yeah.
And then you got your figure, and they have this little chip at the bottom.
Right.
If the trace is correct, I will find them quickly, Master.
I mean, it's not even his voice.
That's Captain Scarlet.
Yeah.
And then he did something else. And then lightsaber noise, and they all came with different ones.
What I loved about those contact chips is that they make good figure stands.
See, I don't own anything like this. Don't even remember these.
Could you hear that?
Oh, yeah.
Could you hear that? Terrible one. Liam Neeson, and then 3PO. He had one as well, and yeah, parts are showing. Yeah, so they're a good little device, and I've had this for years. Well, like everything else. Battle droid
still works. That's cool.
This thing.
Oh, I love those.
Yeah.
And every Ranger figure in that line, Dave, come with one of them little voice sayings, and you just had to buy one communicator. And
I think they did up until another wave of figures came out. Yeah, but yeah, most of the Phantom Menace ones did. Yeah.
Yeah, all the episode 1 figures came with those contact chips.
Yeah.
And it was great because they make great stands for them.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, they're good. They're good stands.
It was like this size, so it came like that.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And so you got your com chips and stuff, and every figure would come because it came with that blind thing. Do you remember that thing you used to pull down on the figures? That wasn't episode 1. Do you remember just before?
Oh yeah, I remember.
That's what DTM show inside. It's pretty.
Did
cool.
they do this for all Star Wars lines, or just for the Phantom Menace, or did they do it for?
They did go
all of them?
into. I'm sure they went into another line.
They did have them in Power of the Force 2. They had a wave. There was like a Han Solo, I think a Leia. I remember the Stormtrooper because I have the Comtech Stormtroopers here.
Yep,
I've got one myself.
Right, yeah.
And they still hold up. I mean,
they did bring it back for the Force Awakens. Remember, it was the arm thing.
Well, they had the
you
Force
on your arm.
Yeah, the
Force
thing. But the fact that they weren't on stands like that, it was.
So they double up the stands, don't they?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, they're
That's
good
why I
little
like
stands as
them.
well. They're not bad.
They worked well for stands. Yeah.
But
So why did that stop then?
I just think these figures look so good, in my opinion. I don't know.
do,
Maybe I'm
yeah.
just a fan of 5POA.
Yeah.
You know.
No,
Oh,
I
that
think
is
they hold up very well. Yeah, I got a bunch of those.
That's my preview one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got they got you could get those cheap for a while. I got like a bunch of them.
Still can.
Nice little vehicle that.
Not the new one,
Yeah,
you can't.
oh, there you go. Yeah.
I mean, such a decent looking figure as got.
I mean, look at the detail on
yeah.
those guys.
Yeah.
That's amazing detail, and those figures are 26 years old.
Yeah.
They don't do very much. They're like pepper pots, but they look pretty good.
Come to think of it, we don't have a black series of one of those guys. Come to think of it, you know, there's a lot they missed from the prequels that they haven't done.
Yours looks in
No,
better
I mean,
condition
2
than
minds
that,
where they'd spit the Lego
Mine's
up for
all-
that, the
all
droideka.
Yeah. I thought about getting that, so.
Yeah, the Lego have made one, haven't they? And it's quite cool, but I'm like, because I like to keep a rule with Lego that only buy original trilogy, so I do like that.
Yeah, it is good. That.
Yeah, it's a great figure, that, isn't it? I think we've all got that one. It's just perfect. Yeah. 5PO.
That was the hot figure of the first wave. Was Darth
accessories
Maul.
that come with it and the little play features. Like, you just don't get those anymore. It's so
It's
cool
smart.
to see them.
I found these Micro Machine Episode 1 play
that's excellent,
sets.
that.
I mean, these are awesome. I've never opened them, but
you should do. Get one open.
Yeah,
Steph will do it. Give him the Steph.
No, I couldn't break the tape. But
What are they, Dagobah? Is it Dagobah?
No, that's
that's the sacred place.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love these Micro Machines sets, but yeah, I've struggled. I only found this is the only 3 things I found in my collection that I've still got from.
You've got the Obi-Wan.
Oh, Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
Never actually got that one.
That was like, that
It's
was
yours,
like later on.
Do you remember later on you used to get Obi and Qui-Gon where they had a button on the belly and you press it and the lightsaber actually glue up?
Oh,
I mean, it was
each other.
and it was it was single. They were in single
Yeah,
pack.
the blade were massive, wasn't it?
And
Yeah,
the
I
blade was
remember.
pretty big, and you press the thing, and the blade lit up.
I think that was from the
Qui-Gon.
when the
Packaging had
3D
Darth Maul
release. They
3D release had the
3D.
3D cards on the side. Exactly right, mate. Exactly right.
We'll
Anybody
never
else
see
want to
Star
show
Wars
something?
toys like that again. The only thing I have to show is I've nothing vintage, but I did love the Qui-Gon. I thought he was an excellent character, so I was able to get a custom poncho for him, and I love this thing. It's able to, it's wired. You're able to kind of manipulate it and twist it around and take photographs. And unfortunately, typical Hasbro fashion, you can't get the saber in 2 hands. But yeah, it was awesome when they redid this figure there a couple of years ago in the card back. We got an updated fake scub, so you can see it was a much better likeness to Liam Neeson. And
is that Black Series, Connor?
Yeah, that's the Black Series one. Now I bought the 3-pack there that was out a couple of months ago, but it went in the loft with my Dragonfly. So the only 2 figures I had for the prequels was Qui-Gon, and I grabbed my droid out of my tub, but I left his little face in it. But looking at Scott's, so this is just the Black Series one, which
That's the Black Series.
Last year.
Yeah.
But Scott's one has a little play feature. This is just, it's great articulation on it. But just to see all those little features you got on the toys back then, like I said, we're never going to see them again. It's so unfortunate that those days are gone.
Mohammed Val was saying he was watching the Vectis Star Wars toy auction yesterday, and he bought something. Of course, he did. He said they have a life-size Pepsi Darth Maul, which sold for $480. That's not a bad price, that, for a life-size
no,
Darth
not bad.
Maul.
Life-size Darth Maul.
Yeah, I wanted it as my collection, but I had no transport.
No,
Yeah,
it's,
but the
it was
Pepsi
collection
stale.
only. You couldn't. They wouldn't ship it. That's why it was so low. They wouldn't ship it. You had to go pick it up.
Should have gone and picked him up, Si. Put it in back at car.
Should have.
Darth Maul hanging out with that pill to him.
Bang out a mini lightsaber on. And that sometimes, you know, lads, I will tell you the truth. When we've had this conversation tonight so far for an hour and a bit, and we've pulled out Qui-Gon Jinn, Darth Maul, the Emperor's made a return back to Star Wars. The battle droids are amazing. We've looked at proper protocol droids at the beginning. I never really saw anything much to hate about the Phantom Menace, I'll be fair.
No.
Do you know, it was, like I said, for me, it was visually spectacular. Star Wars was back. It didn't, I will tell you the truth, and you know my feelings on the sequels, but the only time I ever got emotional like Martin was when I watched the Force Awakens trailer. And I don't know if that's because I'm now in my 40s and, you know, I've missed Star Wars for such a long time. And when I first saw that Force Awakens trailer, I was like an idiot. And the reason being is I'm a massive fan of like medieval and King Arthur and stuff. And when I saw that crossguard lightsaber and that castle and the way that Kylo Ren's outfit was done like a knight, my head just went boom. I just couldn't believe what I was watching. And then that TIE fighter flight after the Millennium Falcon in today's graphics, today's way, it was the most beautifulest thing I'd ever seen. It's just a shame the way they turned out. But again, was it that Phantom Menace trailer? No, I don't. You know, that was just something.
That was something else.
We were ready for Star Wars.
Never see it again,
weren't we?
Yeah.
But as Matt said earlier, Matt said that George Lucas wrote those films as a trilogy. He had that mindset at the time. So I take Matt's point then that's where the sequel trilogy was such garbage because there was, you know, no foresight to write those three trilogies. So I do take your point on that, Matt. I appreciate you raising that the sequels were so bad.
Can I ask you a question? This is one of the things about Phantom Menace that got it for me was this character right here.
Yeah.
I mean, to see to me, it just portrayed what Ian McDiarmid brought to this character because this isn't the Emperor. It is, but it isn't. It is the side. You know what I mean? And the way
slimy politician, wasn't he? He was a real.
He was just superb though. The way he plays it, it's like when he goes to and I'll watch your future with great interest. We all know.
He manipulates the entire thing just so he can become chancellor.
Such a good character, so well.
This is something that got me about this character. It's good that you bring this up because this was another thing that I had to live through. I had to live through the eyes of my friend, or my basically what I call my sister today, my sister Jamie there, because we went and saw all these movies together, you know, as you know, because she knew I loved the original so much as a kid. She was always taking me, let's go see Star Wars now that's in the theaters again. And me being a fan, I knew from a child that the Emperor was Emperor Palpatine because I had read the books, I had read the magazines, I had done all this stuff. But she had no clue that the Emperor's name was Palpatine. She just knew him as the Emperor. Even getting some of the toys as a kid, it always said the Emperor. It never said Palpatine on the toys. So when she was watching, when we got to the last movie, and she's watching the Revenge of the Sith, and Palpatine turns to Darth Sidious, she was like, I remember her sitting in the theater next to me like, oh my gosh.
Oh, man.
It's been the whole time. And then all these things clicked, like the ride home. She's like, so when he did that was on purpose. When he did this, he made it happen. He was manipulating everything from the beginning. I'm going, and it just blew my mind. I'm like, oh my God, I'm glad it's having this effect.
Yeah, I got to give...
You know, like watching it, knowing it, you see it right from Phantom Menace. You see all the setup. But hearing it from someone who didn't know it, it was just like that much more exciting and awesome that like, oh, George pulled it off, you know? For people who didn't know, you know?
And I thought that's a good win for the sequel or the prequels because when you go back and watch them now, and you can put all the pieces together, you can see it. Like, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you were like me when it started off, and they're talking about a trade dispute in the Trade Federation, a blockade. You're like, gee, you know what I mean? It's like watching the 6 o'clock news here. What's going on? When you watch it as a whole, like you can really appreciate the the whole arc of the story and where it was going and the character development, and particularly Palpatine speaks to that, where he just twisted and manipulated everybody along the way.
Yeah, well, he manipulated it so he'd have another vote of no confidence. He manipulated his way into getting in the running for the spot, and then slowly knocked out the other guys so that he'd be the one everyone would vote for. And he used that Naboo blockade as a way to get sympathy votes, just like he even says. You know what I mean? It's like, and Matt's right. It's Ian that has a lot of the credit there.
You got to give him credit, because if you watch his scenes where he's Darth Sidious with his mannerisms, his voice is very different than when he's Senator Palpatine or at the end Chancellor Palpatine. I mean, you got to give the guy props. It was really well done how he did that. I mean, all of us, read the books and stuff. The Emperor's name was Palpatine, and then you see, that's the guy, and it's like,
you know what though, Bat? I think it's that sort of Batman cowl thing, isn't it? Where it's just a turn of that hood, little bit down over his eyes. The character, like, he was filmed good, and I mean, it was like what's it, Andrew? Like if Babylon 5, it was like the guy was a method actor. Was Andreas Katsoulis? He plays
Jakar.
And Jakar, awesome. He has full makeup because he's like kind of like a lizard type person, an alien.
Yeah.
And it was like the guys were like, if I need to talk to Andreas, I got to get him before he goes into makeup, because the outfits, I mean, for or the makeup and stuff really kind of makes the character for some actors. I hear him talking about it, and Ian McDermott was very good about that. Because it was like when he puts, and even like in Revenge of the Sith, when he's fighting, he's not acting like Darth Sidious until he puts the cowl on or puts the hood on, and it's amazing how he does that. It was really well done.
I agree with you for the most part, but there's some amazing pieces of acting in the Phantom Menace where things fall into place for Palpatine, where, for example, Padme calls for a vote in no confidence, and the camera just slowly moves to the left, and you see you get a picture of his face sort of change.
It's like the Grinch, isn't it?
He doesn't have to wear the hood, but I get you.
Absolutely. Yeah, like I said, he just really did a hell of a job.
But you think that's what added to the excitement, because we knew like Anakin was going to grow up to be Darth Vader. We knew this was Emperor Palpatine. We knew that what was going to come. That yes, there is going to be a trilogy. George Lucas is back to do all three, and by the end of it, this kid's going to be Darth Vader. And I think for me, that was every film I was so excited seeing. So when it came to like the scene in Revenge of the Sith when they're putting the helmet on Vader, which to me, the whole cinema, you can hear a pin drop. Do you know what I mean? You heard that sound effect and everything just amazingly. So, for what Matt says, what you said at the beginning about Phantom Menace being a build-up for them too, I will agree with that. But I think it's a brilliant build-up. Do you know where you lit the Star Wars firework, and it's a proper big one that's gone bang. Do you know what I mean? And we're all back on again straight away. So I do believe that. Yeah,
that's to George Lucas and the way it was written, the story that he's telling. He, he wasn't a great director, but what he was good at was telling a story, and that story was told perfectly, I think, for episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I mean, you can say there's loopholes and stuff like that, or there's whatever you call them, but at the end of the day, I just thought he did a fantastic job in getting the story that he wanted. And at the end, it was a story of like Anakin Skywalker, wasn't it? Him growing up as a slave in episode 1, becoming a Jedi in episode 2, the fall in episode 3, then finishing at episode 6 with the redemption of Anakin Skywalker. So,
Stu, let me ask you a question. Do you think it worked because he wrote episodes 3, 4, 5? I mean, 4, 5, 6, and so he had a lot to go back on to make.
Yeah, I think it did. Yeah, because when he did Star Wars, the original Star Wars, he didn't know it was going to be a huge success. So it would have been a great standalone film. If it had flopped, it would have just been Star Wars. That was it. But because of the way it was so successful, then he could write episodes 4 and 5, and then later on he could do episodes 1, 2, and 3. So yeah, I just think it was a fantastic story.
But I suppose the trilogy does have its problems, and I know, like, we're all fans and we all love it. But looking at it does have its problems. And
I think it come from this. If he got somebody else to direct,
if you watch the making of the prequels, there's a couple of documentaries out there. You can see he's surrounded a lot by yes men, and he walks into a room and everyone's yes, George, great, George, we'll do that, George. Do you think it suffers not having someone like Gary Kurtz as the producer from Star Wars or Marcia Lucas, the editor? I think they were people that kind of kept them in tow to a certain degree in some of the storytelling in the original trilogy.
The funniest thing for me, though, you see, you look at Ben Burt for sound, you look at John Williams, you look at Dennis Muir, and you look. To me, I understand what you're saying, but I think when it came to the original trilogy, it was all these lads that put it together. I think, but the person getting the biggest thing for it was George Lucas. So I think his ego did probably take over by the time he got there, because it's funny, you read about Richard Marquand and who is it? Irving
Ralph McQuarrie was the designer.
But he was always there. Do you know what I mean? He was always on set. So it's his baby, innit? I mean, he's the one. But I think you're right. I think that's where the sequel trilogy suffered, is because there were so many yes men. And I think back then, do you know what I mean?
One thing that, like, when you have like an Irving Kirshner, Gary Kurtz, and these other guys that like got to know George Lucas. I mean, his first wife. I think the Return of the Jedi really kind of suffered because she wasn't there to help him edit it.
Yeah.
It changed.
I think it was Gary Kurtz.
Yeah, that too.
He'd gone by them.
Well, yeah, but the thing is there were times when he had people around him that knew him and were like, "Hey, George, I see what you're trying to do. How about we try it this way?" Those people were not around him when he did the prequels. And I think they, as much as I enjoy the movies and I do really like them, and I've liked them the whole time, they could have been better if he got people that, because to take over where he's weak, where he's not a good director. I mean, like Harrison Ford said, it was like, that George Lucas just doesn't understand actors. He's like, well, I wrote it down, just do what I wrote. He doesn't understand how actors do their craft. And now he's directing. And most of his direction was do it faster and more intense.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And it was like, if you get somebody to help him write the screen, he's great with the overall concept story and the arc. It's phenomenal. I love what he's doing. If he got some people to help him with the screenplay, if he got some people to direct other than him, these could have been like just as mind-blowing as Star Wars when it first came out. And these are good movies. But I mean, just there's a thing that what could have been kind of thing,
Yeah. But the whole thing was based around this character. So what did we think of young Anakin?
Well, I'll tell you something about that poster. I went to Echo a couple of years back, and I'd walked in, and there was that poster, full size, beautiful, signed at the bottom by Jake Lloyd. 60 quid in a frame, right? So I walked in, looked at it. I thought, if that's still there when I come back round, I might have a think of that. I'd literally just walked straight round Echo like that. As soon as I got back to it, it'd gone completely.
Yeah, I would have bought it.
Right, because that is one of the most beautifulest posters in Star Wars, isn't it?
Yeah.
I thought, why did they just not pick it up there and then signed by Jake Lloyd? I'll never know. And it was just 60 quid. That's all it was.
Yeah. I have the one right from the theater that we waited in line at. As soon as the movie came down, the manager called me up and was like, "Here's the poster for you." And then around, I got the double-sided one that they would put in the light boxes. So
that's the one I have.
So it's iconic, in it. It's an iconic poster.
You've got Anakin Skywalker there, and then you've got the shadow of Vader behind him.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Before the film came out, we all knew that he was going to be turning into Darth Vader, but that was just incredible. I thought that was genius how they'd done that.
They could have just released that poster and not brought out any trailers.
No, you're right.
Just as excited.
You're absolutely right.
Me,
and I have to give kudos to the young actor, because and I know a lot of people weren't big fans of the acting or whatever with him, but when you're watching it, you're kind of engaged by him as the kid. You're not associating him with Vader. He's able to take this. Split your mind away from that connection, and you're invested in him winning the pod race, and escaping slavery and getting away from Watto. And I think he done a fabulous job from that regard.
Yeah.
I think by then we got a kid called Macaulay Culkin, didn't we, in movies? And Macaulay Culkin was like a little adult one. He was something else, that kid. And I just think that every kid had like a standard to get to when it came to him. Even though that kid was a one-off, one of him in Home Alone and stuff. So I just think that kid, you know, they called him Mannequin Skywalker, didn't they? And they thought he was a bit... Man, I always liked that little kid. I always liked him in Jingle All the Way as well. I always thought he was great in that.
He tried it on with Padme when he was 9. Well, fair play to the boy.
As much as I like,
he got there in the end, didn't he? It took him 10 years, but he got there.
He got there.
That's the thing I think would have worked better.
He's a kid acting like a kid. And what the kids do, they whine, they moan, and they. So I've got no issue with the guy. I thought he did a great job.
Really endearing.
I think it would have served the story better if they got an older, like somebody closer to Natalie Portman's, like 15, 16-year-old instead of a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
I do remember watching one thing, and there was all these kids in this reel, and they were all doing for the role. And there was one kid that was outstanding. There was one kid, a bit old. He looked a little bit more like Luke Skywalker. And this kid, I thought, do you know which one I mean? They're like the good.
Yeah, it's on the making of documentary in episode 1. That kid, Zach, if you go on YouTube, he's actually made a documentary called "I Missed Out on Becoming Anakin Skywalker" as an adult. I agree. So as soon as I saw him, I was like, oh, "Wow, he was great."
Yeah, there was another kid that you'd have been like he would have been, but obviously, you know, they saw something in Jake Lloyd, and that's what they went with. And I never minded him. I didn't.
No, I don't either. I think it would have served the story a little bit better, because it was like when they're saying he's too old, I was like, he's 10. You know, because you think about it was coming in with an original trilogy bias. I was like, you didn't start training Luke until he was.
But I think that works with the story, doesn't it? Because that was always Yoda's concern, wasn't it? Was the fact that he's getting a bit older now. If you had him as a baby, maybe he wouldn't have turned.
That's one thing about the end of the movie when he's talking to Obi-Wan. If you notice, he says the Council agrees with Obi-Wan training Anakin as a Padawan. Yoda doesn't, because he sits there and he goes, yeah, we agreed. He goes like, we're making you a Jedi Knight, but he goes, agree with you taking on Anakin as a Padawan. I do not. And then he says, but the Council eventually says the Council does agree with you, so he'll be your apprentice. But he makes it a point. Yoda makes it a point that he does not agree that Anakin should be trained as a Jedi.
No,
I always got that he knew that he was bad because the dark side always clouded. I always got the point that he didn't know anything. Do you know what I mean? There's nothing of that. Because he couldn't sense anything of that kid. That's what worried him, that he just couldn't sense anything about him. And I think that's what worried Yoda. I think that's what made him go.
They were sensing, because he had the attachment to his mother. He was afraid for his mother.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it was, and it's honestly, that is what Anakin's downfall ultimately is. It's his love for his mother that makes him go off mission in the next movie. And then it's his love for Padme and everything. He's trying to save her life, and it ends up taking her life.
Yeah. This character, to me, what did you think of her?
My uncle's going to call me after 5:30, so if I get a sudden call, I've got to go. Okay.
No problem.
No problem.
Yeah, sorry.
No, I remember seeing this girl in Leon, and I thought she was
she was epic
in Leon. So when I heard she was done for this, I thought, yeah, fair enough. I mean, but I think Natalie Portman did a great job as Padme. You know,
and so did Keira Knightley.
Keira Knightley did it as well,
as good.
Yeah, Keira Knightley was a body double.
Because there's rumours of her coming back into the next Ahsoka season. But for these, I think for these three, especially for the Phantom Menace, the way they set her up, I think she. I mean, how old was she? Was she 13?
She was like 16.
A well-written, strong female character.
Exactly right.
She was always going to be compared to Princess Leia, and it was always going to be a tough one for them to break with the character. But I think, you know, the scene in Naboo, she's leading the soldiers. She's running in front with a blaster. She's running, you know, and you kind of immediately have respect for the character and as a princess and as a leader. So I think Natalie Portman really played the role well, and I think
I agree.
Luke has got the character exactly right.
Yeah,
there's an argument to be made that she's got more character growth than Leia ever had. if you compare the two trilogies. I mean,
for sure.
I mean, you know, we all love Princess Leia and Carrie Fisher, but you know, she basically started off leading the rebellion and ended leading the rebellion, and that was her character arc pretty much until the end, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So, you know, I think,
and especially when you throw in the Clone Wars, I mean, those are a few episodes with Padme in it, and it's just, I think that builds even more to it. And that's one thing for me when I talk about the prequel trilogy, like watching the Clone Wars every week with my friends who, like, for them the prequels were their Star Wars, you know, because they're some of the guys I knew were 10, 15 years younger than me. And it was like every week we would get together and watch the Clone Wars when it came out. And now with that whole series as a whole, like, that to me is included in my love of the prequels. And so much development of Anakin and Padme and Obi-Wan and everything was in those cartoons, and it's consistent with the films. So that's why I love them. You know, love the whole thing as a package.
I only got to see them during lockdown. That's when I saw the Clone Wars for the first time and was able to finally sit down and binge them as an adult. And as much I'd already liked the prequels. I had a lot of love for those films, but the Clone Wars do an awful lot to trash out some of the storylines and expand it out.
It definitely helped. I agree with that. I 100% agree.
You know, they really add so much more to those films.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that come out when people forget that all that Clone War era, that all was all born out of it. Do you know what I mean? That even though you know the films they weren't as widely successful as the original three. There's been nearly enough 30 years now of that history of this Clone Wars. It's still as strong as ever. Black Series still release these Clone War figures. Do you know what I mean? Every time they're still out, and you know, so you know, and there's a lot of fan base in that now. And I think it's Star Wars that generation below me, 2 decades below me, can really get behind, because that was their Star Wars, and they can be proud of that Clone War era and everything that comes. I mean, that General Kenobi in that white outfit with the brown cape, it's just brilliant, all of it. Do you know what I mean?
It was one of the nicest things about the prequels. I mean, when we all found out they were coming, you had so many questions, didn't you, boys? You're like, oh, they will find out how Anakin became Darth Vader, or you knew about the clone, because we heard about the Clone War since 1977. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and also we know we're going to find out, and then obviously we found out about more Jedi. And yeah, I think the prequels has done a lot for this franchise. I really do. I think it has built. And then, I mean, if you wait, we talk, like Connor's just said, about the Clone Wars helping the prequels. But if it wasn't for the prequels, there was never been a Clone Wars.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you know, you got.
What did you? And speaking of, what did you think? So set the prequels aside. Put your mind back to like 1980 or somewhere in that range. When I heard the Clone Wars, my brain always went to the Jedi were the good guys and the clones were the bad guys. Yeah. Because when we name wars in our own history, we don't name the war after us, the victors. We name it after the people that were attacking. The Vietnam War, the Korean War. You know what I mean? We name it after the things we were
the G-Force
War.
Again,
you know? So I looked at Star Wars with our mindset as an American, I guess, or whatever, and thought the clones had to be the bad guys, and the Jedi fought against the clones. So when I saw the prequels come out, and by the second one, they've made an army of clones, and you've got these, you know, because even when I saw the trailer for Attack of the Clones, and they were like, they came over us in the night, a big wave of attack, you know, like a wave or whatever. I was like, oh my God, it's the clones, and they're wiping out entire planets. You know what I mean? Like,
I saw this wave. With the stormtroopers being the good guys with the clones.
Yeah. I took a different path. I took a different path, and it was like
taking over planets. You know, just thousands of them, and they're wiping out entire planets. So I was like, yeah, we're gonna get to see the Jedi taking on these clones, and there's gonna be thousands of millions of them as they work like a wave over the planet, you know. But then it turned out they were the good guys. And I was like, wait a minute.
I had a completely different take on the Clone Wars when I was a kid. Because you had Obi-Wan. I thought it was Obi-Wan, and he was the original, and they made several clones of him, and they were fighting in the war.
I got you. No, I got you.
Ben Salacious has got a question.
Oh, sorry, Paul.
I was going to say, did Qui-Gon Jinn get it on with Shmi? And it was, and also it was Palpatine impregnates me using the dark side, because that doesn't mean that Rey is actually part Skywalker. Do we all agree with that? No. Everybody, no.
I'm still trying to read the Force line.
I know that there was like alluded, I guess, in the Darth Plagueis novel that what they were doing, they did some kind of Sith ritual. It was supposed to be using the midichlorians to create life, and it may have created.
I didn't mind all that. The midichlorians.
I don't think that. Well, no, I don't have a problem with that. It was like a lot of people, and this is what happens. People don't really pay attention, and it was like they think the midichlorians are the Force. They are not. And it was a thing. The Force is still what Obi-Wan said it was in the first movie. It's an energy field that life creates, and it binds it binds the galaxy together. And what you find out, what they expanded on in the Phantom Menace when Qui-Gon is the Force has a will, and like the Jedi are servants of the will of the Force. I mean, especially Qui-Gon Jinn, because he's the one he talks about. Well, like there's the cosmic Force, and they bring up the idea of the living Force in this movie, and the fact that they think like when he first encounters Anakin and he realizes he's really strong, the Force is really strong with him, and they do the test in the midichlorian test. I mean, a lot of it, it's like they call it M count, I think in they alluded to
later,
in the Mandalorian. Right? But the whole thing was that he, the whole idea that the chosen one was he was created by the Force.
But the midichlorians, the tests that they use to test how many midichlorians, again, that's something that only the new order of Jedi do. That in the past, that would have been something that they wouldn't have bothered doing. They would have just been like, right, I sense the Force in you. And again, it's them becoming, the Jedi becoming, having all these rules. Okay, you've got less than 5,000 midichlorians, you can't come to the Jedi Temple. That's whereas in the past it was always a case of, well, I sense the living Force.
Oh no,
in you.
I agree. And I honestly think it was just introduced to show that he was extremely, because they even say he's got a higher M count than Yoda, so they were just trying to put in the fact that he is like just extremely adept in the
it was a plot device.
Oh yeah, exactly.
That's a serious data breach, though. How does everyone know Yoda's midichlorian count?
I know, right? but George did say
you're playing around in the Jedi archive computers, and you just come across the list of everybody on the council and their M count.
Oh, it's because he's got more than everyone, so he likes to tell everyone. He likes to shut down the temple. Right? Guess how many I've got? You shut
103.
Yeah. But the question I was going to ask is. Sorry, John.
That's okay. Sorry. Didn't George say that if he had done the sequel trilogy, he was going to go into that a little bit more?
Yeah.
He said he was going to go into the microscopic world and explain how the midichlorians allow people, sentient beings, that's like a connection to the Force. And so the more midichlorians someone had, the easier they have at connecting to the Force. But it doesn't necessarily mean that no one who, like, if you had a low count, you couldn't connect to the Force. It's just that you would have a more difficult time. You could end up with a low count and be the most powerful Jedi in the galaxy if you trained hard and worked your balls off. But if someone who has a lot of midichlorians, it's easier for them to learn how to tap into the Force because of that connection.
Yeah, it's funny how
I remember George talking about that in an interview, and he would have explained more of that if he got to do the sequel trilogy. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm not so sure if I want to have a movie about the microscopic world of Star Wars.
When I heard that, I hoped it was just going to be a scene.
Not a whole movie.
I don't think it was going to be literally about that. I think that was probably going to be interwoven into the plot because he was going to bring Darth Maul back, wasn't he, as the main bad guy in the sequel trilogy with Darth Talon as his apprentice.
That'd have been cool. I'd have loved that. I can't imagine Disney doing Darth Talon, but that'd have been nice to see.
Jimmy Pete says, I wish I wasn't at work. I'd rather be at home sipping a Qui-Gon gin.
Nice.
Really? Man of your talents?
Si, what's your question, Si?
My question was, after watching all the original Star Wars, and you looked at all the villains and they were mostly white armored. And I'll ask you this first, Scott. Did you miss the stormtroopers, the clone troopers sort of era in the Phantom Menace, or were you happy with the battle droids? Did you think the battle droids were new enough and think these are great? Or did you miss that sort of stormtrooper look like?
Yeah, I think I was a bit disappointed there were no stormtroopers in it at the time. I got used to it. They're great. The battle droids are, you know, they're okay. Roger, Roger, and all that. You know, they're quite fun. But no, it's stormtroopers really for me. You know, I like the Empire, so it was one of my things at the time. I think that it was difficult to swallow to begin with. There were a few things in the Phantom Menace and in the prequels that it took me a little while to come around to. I think that was one of them. But I enjoyed the battle droids. I thought they were quite fun.
Yeah.
But it's
What
very
about you, Stu? Were you the same? Were you the same, Stu? What did you think?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the battle droids look cool. I mean, you know, Scott's got the battle droid on the stat there. I thought they looked absolutely awesome. You know, the tanks and stuff like that. But I just wish they hadn't given them those stupid voices. I think that if the voices were different and they didn't sound like someone, I don't know, like they did, I think that would have been better for me. But yeah, I preferred the stormtroopers to the battle droids.
Yeah, they were like Keystone Copy, weren't they? They were not like to be took seriously. They were an army, but they were useless in a sense.
And my best line was Revenge of the Sith when Green snapped those lines. You're welcome.
The thing about
I love that line. Yeah,
the thing about the battle droids. Well, the thing about the battle droids, and I really like them in the Phantom Menace, as opposed, they're kind of, you know, it's not that individually they're not that menacing, but the fact that they have so many of them, they just, you know, they're able to just overwhelm you with the amount of droids they have. And I like how the droids are portrayed as compared to what they were like in Revenge of the Sith. I cannot stand how they are, because those are Jedi fighters, all right. And it's like, it sounds like somebody on freaking helium. I mean, these things, especially the super battle droids, I wanted to be more menacing, and I wanted more like a Terminator than how he portrays them. It was just so kiddie and cutesy, and I can't stand them in that movie. I almost want to mute it when they're talking.
Lucas had a real dilemma, because if he was going to be bringing in much more action, lightsabers, Jedi, you know, swinging sabers around, they weren't going to be able to be cutting kind of, you know, real people or stormtroopers in half. By using droids, it allowed for I suppose a much more body count insofar as violence and stuff. And I think that was that's the way I took it at the time. Yeah, I did, like Scott. You know, you kind of there's no stormtroopers, but
I suppose you're right there, Connor. You could show off the Jedi a lot more using battle droids. They're not slicing through men basically with them being stormtroopers, because they were all droids. You could be able to show off the Jedi being a lot more martial arty, you know, a lot more. You're right.
You couldn't have had, you know, stormtroopers' heads and body parts flying all over the screen.
Yeah,
would have been a different movie.
Like you, Dev, did you like him?
Well, I suppose with the battle droids, it was just how many there were. Would it have worked with the fact that you needed that when they killed the control ship, they all just ceased to work? Would that have worked anywhere else if they were stormtroopers? Do you see what I
mean?
Yeah.
But
that's how they. But that's how they play along with. That's how they like.
Somebody's dinner's done it microwave. I don't know what
Stevenade's going off.
Chicken korma's ready.
But you look at Attack of the Clones. I mean, that's what they say about the clone army's superior droids. They have, and again, reading the novel, and it's a different movie, but you talk about how they the clones. There's less clones on Geonosis compared to the battle droids, but the way they can think independently and they don't have to wait for some kind of control signal, they're able to outmaneuver the droids. What is that?
It's louder.
What he does.
That's left his toast in the toaster and the alarm's gone off.
But I like the idea, because they had, and like I said before, you know, Phantom Menace is really kind of setting the stage for this entire trilogy. So you have this massive army that takes over Naboo like that, because they have a small defense force, but you know, they're quickly overwhelmed by just the sheer number of droids that there are.
About you, Dave, were you battle droids? Were you for them? Were you?
He's muted.
We can't hear you. Sound's gone. So while he's sorting it, Matt, I'll ask. Are you back on? I'll ask you, Martin. Same question.
Yeah, well, I mean, firstly, yeah, everybody loves stormtroopers more than the battle droids, but do we want stormtroopers again? We've just had stormtroopers for 3 films. We want something new, and we knew at some point we'd be getting the clones, I think. So I was happy with the battle droids, but I'd also say that the battle droids were a better shot than the stormtroopers. They certainly got a lot more kills in the Phantom Menace compared to the entire of the original trilogy. And thirdly, I think, you know, having seen the whole prequel trilogy now, you know there's a long game there, because they needed a foe that was easily defeated by the Jedi and easily defeated by the clones. So that, and this again, it's all part of what we were saying earlier. It's Palpatine's plan. He's thought of every single permutation, and the battle droids fitted into that perfectly. In terms of, you know, at the end of Revenge of the Sith, switch off all the control ships. That's the end of the war, completely finished. And who's in charge of that? Palpatine. So yeah, I didn't have a problem with them.
Are you back, Dave? No.
No.
As we're coming to the end of it, one of my questions was one of the favourite things you took out of the Phantom Menace. My favourite thing that I took out of it, one of the visions I have, was when Qui-Gon put the lightsaber into that door. Because I'd never seen anything like this. And the door started to lava up and started to melt and all that. It gave me a real impression of what a lightsaber actually is. Do you know what I mean? How hot it is, and so that was something that in this movie that's always stuck with me. But I'll start with Martin and I'll work around. What was a vision that stood out to you?
There's I don't know if you all remember it, but when Darth Maul jumps off his speeder over Anakin and he starts to fight Qui-Gon on Tatooine, there's this, I think it's this is scene for about, I think it lasts for no longer than 2 seconds, and it's a side-on shot of Darth Maul and Qui-Gon fighting each other. You know, and Darth Maul's coming down that and he's deflecting it, but it's a side-on shot, so you see the side of them fighting and they're moving that way. To this day, it's one of my favorite shots in all of Star Wars. I think it's. I mean, I've heard a lot of people say George Lucas isn't a great director. I think he's not a great director in terms of actors, but he's probably one of the best visual directors ever. I mean, you can't argue with that really, with what he's created. So I think that is probably my favorite shot. But in terms of the Phantom Menace in general, it's the lore it brings to Star Wars for me that is the number one factor that I love the film so much.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. What's yours, Connor?
I loved Obi-Wan in the original trilogy, and I loved the dynamics then later on in the films where he was the mentor to Luke, and I always kind of gravitate towards, you know, a strong mentor character in films. And you mentioned the lightsaber going through the door of the blast shield at the start of the film, and rewatching it there recently, I you know, a lot happens in the first kind of 10-15 minutes of that film. A lot gets unpacked, and I remember thinking that I really love seeing that dynamic of a young Obi-Wan looking up to Qui-Gon, seeking his advice, looking for his, you know, his approval, and that dynamic that plays out, because we didn't get a lot of Obi-Wan in the film. You know, he didn't go to the town with the rest of them. He stayed on the ship. So but the little elements that we got of Obi-Wan having Qui-Gon as his master and getting to see that whole element of Jedi that we only ever got to allude to before, I really loved that and appreciated that. And again, going back to what we've said multiple times, it was a good setup for Obi-Wan going off and being then the master for the rest of the film and having to train Anakin. So it was that dynamic. I loved that about the film.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And the way that Obi-Wan, even though he was limited on screen, he grows even in that movie, because later on you see him say, like, "I'm sorry, Master. You know, I can be like fast with my thinking," and you know what I mean. And you see him, like, not a lot of people say they're sorry, realize they did something wrong and say they're sorry. And you can see that growth in Obi-Wan, even just in that little bit he's there, you know?
Yeah.
To becoming that master, that wise master that we all look up to, you know?
I agree. Des, what about you?
I think first and foremost, with the Phantom Menace, it just meant Star Wars was back.
That's a good point. Yeah.
The thing that I loved as a kid is back, and it's everywhere, and it like a sponge, just soaking it all up. It was great. But actually, in the film, I think I don't want to use the word proper lightsaber battles, but meaningful, full-on lightsaber battles was just great. I mean, I know the Vader Luke one was a good sort of in Empire and Jedi was good, but it was just two young, sort of the Sith and the Jedi just going against each other, and it was just faster and more intense.
Yeah, good point. That's a really good point.
Just
Dave,
quickly, I don't know whether you can get it. I've sent you a photo on Instagram.
Let's have a look.
Grab it.
Right.
If you can't, then don't worry.
I will. Dave, what about you?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was colourful, enjoyable, sometimes funny, action-packed. All your favourite characters from the original Star Wars, they were there in some way. Yoda, Obi-Wan. You were going to get Darth Vader along the line. The acting were great. Qui-Gon were great. Liam Neeson, I don't think he's ever been as good, in all honesty, in one of his roles. The standout bits for me, pod racing, and just Qui-Gon as a character, as a Jedi. There's a scene in it where they go back to Naboo to get is it Theed? And he does something to a battle droid with his lightsaber, and he just sort of holsters his lightsaber.
Yeah.
It's just so cool. And so, Phantom Menace, I always like it.
Like Delvian, love seeing Coruscant. What about you, John?
When Darth Maul says, "At last we will reveal ourselves to the Jedi. At last we will have revenge."
I mean, it's a great movie.
What a great movie.
It just makes me think back, and I still want to see it. I want to see the Sith Jedi War. I want to see how that ends, and I want to see Darth Bane saying, "Enough of this. We've got to rule it down to 2 Sith at a time," because that was just a terrible thing to go through. From here on out, let's set these rules.
You should watch The Acolyte, John.
You have to ruin it, Martin. You have to ruin it. Matt, what about you?
For me, it's Obi-Wan. You got to realize my Air Force call sign was Obi-Wan.
Is it?
And I just always I've enjoyed the character. And it's you see him as the mentor in the original trilogy, and then you see him here. He's the student. He's knowledgeable, but he's still a student.
Yeah.
And then you just come up to at the end with the Duel of the Fates. I mean, just the whole battle. I mean, even after Maul takes out Qui-Gon, and it's just Obi-Wan and Maul fighting. That scene where the two of them are. I mean, you look at what's going on in that fight. I mean, it's just so intense and just so. I mean, it's ferocious, that fight, and I love it. I still, for me, I think that's probably one of the best duels in the entire saga. With a close second is the fight in Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
And I mean, because if you look at, I mean, and I like how Dave Filoni says that fight, or the Duel of the Fates, the fate it's Anakin's fate. Who is going to train him?
Yeah.
And you have, I mean, he becomes a Jedi. Obi-Wan becomes a Jedi Knight at the end of the film, but he's not. You can tell later on he's really not up to the task to train Obi-Wan or to train Anakin. Yeah. He just isn't ready for that type of thing, but he does it anyway. And I mean, you can go with, it was the will of the Force for Anakin to fall anyway. It was all part of the plan kind of thing. But, I mean, just the whole, I just love how he is through this whole film. It's like, he does make mistakes. Like when they first get on Naboo, it's a deleted scene. It's in the book. He had his lightsaber wasn't set right or something like that. So when he falls in the water, it shorts out. So that's when you see him running up when Qui-Gon's with Jar Jar, and then Obi-Wan comes running up and the Stapp's behind him. He can't fight back because his lightsaber is not working. And it's like, oh, it's going to take a while for this to recharge. You know, and he got kind of admonished by Qui-Gon about it because he made this simple mistake. And so it works later, obvious, but it was just kind of neat that there was those little things like that in the film.
Yeah,
with him, there was, like I said, there was growth for him, and it's like later on where he really disagrees with Qui-Gon. He's like, he's like, the boy's dangerous. They all see it. Why can't you? And he's like, don't defy the council again, master. Kind of thing. And it's like, he's doing these things, and then later on, he's like, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. I'm happy you think I'm ready for the trial and everything. Because if you look at him in that scene where Qui-Gon's trying to take him as a Padawan, or take Anakin as a Padawan, because the council doesn't want him trained, Obi-Wan's pretty pissed. I mean, he's like pretty offended, and but he waits until like they're alone to kind of get, hey, what the hell, man? So it was, for me, that's really it for it really makes the movie for me, and that duel at the end. I mean, it's just awesome.
So what's Obi-Wan's first line in the film?
He's shabby dancing about this. Yeah. He's shabby dancing.
Yeah. He says, "I have a bad feeling about this." Yeah. It sets up It sets up all of Star Wars. If you think about it. Yeah, it sets up all of the whole 6 films with that one line in the beginning of the movie.
Si, what's yours, buddy?
2, really. As you know, I absolutely love Return of the Jedi. So it was mint to go back to Tatooine. It was mint seeing Jabba the Hutt and mint having Bib Fortuna back. I loved all that. But like Matt, it's that ending, it's that Jewels of the Fate when they're fighting Darth Maul, 2 of them. For me, I'm a massive fan of Japanese cinema. I love Japanese culture and manga. And that ending for me was so Shaolin. It was so it was just something about it, watching the master die in his arms. And there was just something so Japanese about that sort of samurai ending, if you'll have me. I loved it. I thought it was amazing. So them 2 bits are the mostly the standout bits for me.
What about you, Stuart?
Stuart, bloody hell. All right, lads, crikey.
Stuart.
Again, I've got a couple of bits. The first one is Darth Maul when Qui-Gon Jinn's is sat down and you've got that force or shield in front of him and he's just stalking backwards and forwards across the other side of that shield. And just the look, and he's just stalking him, and that is so intense. I love that. I thought that was really cool. And the second thing for me was I didn't appreciate him as much as I should have done at the time, but now looking back, it's Palpatine. How cool was that guy? I mean, he was just absolutely superb. He manipulated everything. He was the puppet master, and I just thought Ian portrayed him superbly. So those 2 for me.
Scott.
Yeah, I was going to say Palpatine actually, and seeing the rise in his machinations. But there's a lot of visuals as well. I think I absolutely love the design of the Naboo fighters, the M1 fighters, and the ship. Seeing Coruscant for the first time, and a lot of things like that. I think some of those designs are absolutely fantastic. So things like that, and again, that moment in the doorway as the double-bladed lightsaber. That is just probably one of the most iconic moments in Star Wars, isn't it? I think.
Do you know the funniest thing is we talk about Anakin being like the young Padawan in back then in the 90s, but there was another right there.
Who's that?
Zoe T.
No, there's another.
Yes, you bought your child a red lightsaber.
Yeah, good. Sith Lord.
At last, the Sith will have their revenge.
The last time we built lightsabers at Galaxy's Edge, it was a few years ago.
She's gonna kill me.
And my younger son Rowan, he decided he just wanted the red crystal. He was going to buy a different crystal later, and but he was showing Rey, the cast member, his lightsaber, and she's like, "Well, I hope you only picked red because you like the color."
Right, so Si, we're done. So we've done Return of the Jedi, we've done Venice. I think we've all come to the conclusion this is a great movie, isn't it? It's a great movie.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So
And the more I watch it, the
See you,
more
John.
it feels like Star Wars to me. The more I watch it, the more I get precious over that original Lucasfilm lot, and I love it. Love the Phantom Menace. Love it.
I just love stuff like this side that you set it up because I love the Return of the Jedi one, and this is awesome as well. You know, everyone getting together and doing this sort of stuff. I love this. So we'll definitely do another, but we're not doing them in order, are we? Because we've gone Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, no, any sort of.
So the next
No,
one
so
will
the
be
others
Empire.
out my hands now. I chose the first two. This is totally out my hands. So
Well, we'll
whatever we
definitely-
talk about next, these gentlemen have to discuss it.
Yeah, well, whoever wants to come up with the next one, we'll definitely do it. So,
Should
all
all
right,
go.
well, I appreciate everyone coming on. Don't forget
No,
to
thank
like
you.
and
Cheers,
subscribe
man.
to all these channels. They've been absolutely brilliant. And we're done. Anyone else got anything to say before? Oh, talk about how I've got ZSR on Friday, but then I'm on Stu's TV.
Oh, you are, aren't you? Yeah.
You watch him get a Phantom Menace question. Now I get it wrong. I'll be good.
Cancelled after last Sunday then.
Hey, oh, no, it's going to take more than that. It's going to take more than that, Des. It's going to take more than that, mate.
How'd you put up with all that controversy, Stu? How'd you put up with it?
Just blames it on
One
George.
thing my
He
brain-
cries himself to sleep.
He
I
logs
did that,
off.
I tell you.
That's
I
it.
did that. Oh, blimey. And two of the worst culprits sitting in this panel right now, Mr. Martin and Matt.
Well, if you can't, I mean, I'm sorry, but the answer they gave was correct as you said the question. That one.
No.
I like the way you put that map up behind the scenes and you wrote what it was, and then Simon did it again with Asda Co-op.
Galen Merrick was correct for the question you originally asked.
What we're done. So thank you to John, thank you to Martin, Connor, Matt, our side, Des, good old DTM, our
Thanks
Stu.
for having us on.
I've loved it again. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for sharing
Yeah,
the
it's been
experiences.
fun, thank you.
And
Great
we'll see you
crack,
for the
lads.
next one.
Always
All
a lot
right.
of fun.
Good night.
Slán ball.